Hi, welcome to 7 Facts, the channel where you'll find the most awesome facts about every single country on Earth. In today's episode of the Canadian series, we'll talk about Nova Scotia, but there's a playlist containing all of the Canadian videos, so be sure to check it out. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. I upload twice a week, so it'll be worth it. Nova Scotia, which is Latin for New Scotland, was one of the earliest places Europeans started to colonize in North America. In 1605, French colonists were the ones who established the first permanent European settlement at Port Royal, in what was to become Canada. This founding also led to the creation of the French colony of Acadia. But the land was also sought by the British. Thus, beginning with the year 1688, 6 wars took place in Nova Scotia before the British defeated the French and ultimately expelled much of their population. Most of Acadia became part of Nova Scotia, but later on, Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick became separate colonies. Both Nova Scotia and New Brunswick would later participate in the founding of the Dominion of Canada. Although today Canada is an independent country, a piece of British soil still survives to this day and will continue to survive for centuries. On the very southern tip of the Halifax Peninsula, there is a park called Point Pleasant. There's nothing abnormal or special about it, it's just a regular park. Except, it's not Canadian. Back when Canada was still under British control, the Crown leased the land to the Nova Scotia government for 999 years. Even though Canada is now independent, this contract still stands. The lease was negotiated in 1866, which means the park will continue to be leased until the year 2865. There's even a fee that has to be paid by the Canadian government, a ceremonial 1 shilling per year. The capital of Nova Scotia is the city of Halifax, one of Canada's oldest population centers. The establishment of Halifax in 1749 marked the beginning of an actual war. By unilaterally establishing Halifax, the British were violating earlier treaties with the native Mi'kmaq population and the French Acadians, and thus a 6-year war commenced. Nowadays, of course, Halifax is not at the center of such disputes. It is in fact one of Canada's most prosperous cities and one of the best places to live in Canada. On a side note, Halifax today is quite a bit larger than it was 20 years ago. That's because in 1996, all municipal governments within Halifax County were amalgamated into one, thus the entire county is now governed as a single entity. Halifax was also the scene of a gruesome record. The largest ever man-made explosion until the discovery of atomic bombs happened in the harbor of Halifax. On the morning of December 6, 1917, the Norwegian vessel SS Imo collided with the French cargo ship SS Mont Blanc. The problem was that the French ship was carrying high explosives, and the fire that resulted from the collision ignited the cargo. The explosion that occurred just 20 minutes after the accident destroyed an entire district of Halifax and killed 2,000 people. An additional 9,000 were injured from the blast wave, debris, fires, and collapsed buildings. Nearly all structures within an 800-meter radius were obliterated. The pressure wave snapped trees, bent iron rails, demolished buildings, grounded vessels, and scattered fragments of Mont Blanc for kilometers. Hardly any window in the city proper survived the blast. Across the harbor in Dartmouth, there was also widespread damage. An actual tsunami created by the blast wiped out a community of the Mi'kmaq natives who had lived in the Tufts Cove area for generations. It is estimated that the explosion released an equivalent of roughly 2.9 kilotons of TNT. In the early hours of April 15, 1912, the RMS Titanic sank in the North Atlantic Ocean, killing over 1,500 people in what was one of the deadliest commercial maritime disasters in history. We all know the tragic story and how the RMS Carpathia brought the 705 survivors to New York. But Halifax also played a role in the aftermath of the accident. The city practically became the undertaker of the Titanic. Once the massive loss of life became known, White Star Line chartered the cable ship Mackay Bennett from Halifax to retrieve bodies. They left with embalming supplies, undertakers, and a clergyman. But they found so many bodies that the embalming supplies were quickly exhausted. The retrieved bodies were taken back to Halifax, where a temporary morgue was set up in the city's curling rink. Undertakers from all across eastern Canada were called to assist, but even so, about 1/3 of the bodies were unidentified. While some bodies were shipped to be buried in their hometowns, most of them, 150, were buried in the city's cemeteries. Charles Fennerty, a poet from Halifax, was the first person to use wood fibers to make paper. He started experimenting in 1838 and produced paper from wood pulp in 1844. His process was later adapted into the production of the newsprint and started a whole new industry. Today, Friedrich Gottlob Keller, a German inventor, is most commonly attributed with the invention of paper. He was also working on the same thing during those years, unaware of Fennerty's work. Little attention was given, and even Fennerty himself never pursued the idea, and he never took out a patent on his process, while Keller did. Nevertheless, pulped wood paper slowly began to be adopted by paper mills throughout Canada, the US, and Europe, and by the end of the 19th century, almost all newspapers in the Western world were using Fennerty's pulpwood paper. If you love horses, you need to come to Nova Scotia. They have an island there called Sable Island, full of pony-like wild horses. The first horses were released on the island in the late 18th century and soon became feral. The present-day horses are thought by most historians and scientists to have descended mostly from horses seized by the British from the Acadians during the expulsion of the Acadians. Although small, Sable Island horses are not ponies, but a subspecies of horses that don't grow larger due to the lack of nutritional food on the island. Since the 1960s, the Canadian government protected the horses by law in their feral state. The herd of 550 individuals is unmanaged and legally protected from interference by humans. These were 7 facts about Nova Scotia. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Share your thoughts downstairs in the comment section, and afterwards check me out on Facebook and Twitter. A good way to offer more support to this channel is through Patreon, link in the description. I hope to see you next time. Bye.